Here's the thing about small towns. They are supposed to be safe. You are supposed to know about your neighbors, leave your doors unlocked, and let your kids roam without a second thought. Pocatello, Idaho in 2006 was that kind of a place. It was kind of a town where a straight-A student like Cassie Jo Stoddart could take on a little responsibility, house-sitting for her aunt and uncle for the weekend, without anyone batting an eye. But on the afternoon of 24th September, when the Contreras family pulled back into their driveway on Whispering Cliffs Drive, that illusion of safety shattered. 13 years old Alex walked into the living room of the quiet house and found his cousin Cassie on the couch. She had been stabbed to death. It was a scene so violent, so out of place in that quiet neighborhood that didn't make any kind of a sense. For 2 days, while the family was gone, Cassie had been lying there. The police were called, and immediately the machinery of a murder investigation began to turn. They had a body, a crime scene, and a whole lot of questions. What they didn't know yet was that they were about to walk into a real-life horror movie, one that had been meticulously planned, filmed, and bragged about by the killers themselves. When the detectives arrived first at the scene at Whispering Cliffs, they did what they always do. They started looking for lost people to see the victim alive. The list was short. Cassie's boyfriend, Matt Beckham, was the obvious starting point. He had been there that night. They had watched movies together. He was the last known person to see her breathing. Then there were two other names, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. They were classmates of Cassie's. They were also 16 years old. They had stopped by to hang out but left early, saying that they were going to movies. A pretty standard Friday night for a group of school kids. At first, the investigation hit a few snags. Cassie's mom's boyfriend had his fingers on the circuit breaker in the basement. That raised a red flag until he explained he'd done some electric work there some months earlier. Then attention swung hard toward Matt Beckham. He seemed oddly calm when he heard about Cassie's death, but he passed a polygraph test and his story checked out. He had an alibi, his mom, who picked him up, and he went home. So if it wasn't the boyfriend and it wasn't the family friend, who was it? Detectives circled back to Brian and Tori. The two boys were brought in separately. They were cooperative, confident even. They told police that they had left the house around 8 p.m. to go see a movie called Pulse at the local theater. It sounded fine, but then the detectives asked them a simple question. What was the movie about? And they couldn't answer. Not a single detail. They stumbled over their words and looked at each other. That's when the story started to crack. They admitted that they hadn't gone to the movies at all. They had been driving around, maybe checking out unlocked cars. It was a bad lie, and it was the first thread that once pulled would unravel the entire thing. While detectives were working on Brian and Tori in the interrogation room, another team was searching the vast, rugged landscape of Black Rock Canyon. Brian Draper had led them there. See, once the pressure got too high, Draper started talking. He didn't confess right away. He tried to put it all on Tori, but he did say there was evidence out there, evidence they had tried to destroy. They found a pit where the boys had dumped their clothes, the masks they wore, and the knives. But the most crucial piece of evidence was a particularly burned VHS tape. It was damaged, but the lab was able to restore it. And when they watched it, they realized this wasn't just a murder investigation anymore. It was an investigation into two kids who thought they were making a documentary about being a famous serial killers. The tape changed everything. There were multiple recordings. In one, filmed the day of the murder, the two of them are sitting in a room talking directly to the camera. They talk about their death list. They talk about wanting to be like one of the villains from the Scream movie, like Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. They talked about how there should be no law against killing people. At one point, Draper looks into the lens and say, "I'm sorry to Cassie's family, but she had to be the one." It wasn't a confession made under pressure. It was a performance. They were playing the role of cold-blooded killers for an audience they assumed would eventually watch it. The police, the FBI, maybe the whole world. They wanted notoriety. And then there was the footage from the night of the murder. You can hear them in the car whispering, talking about the grueling task of killing their two friends who were right in that house, just down the street. Finally, there is a post-murder footage. The audio is haunting. You can hear the adrenaline. Draper says, "We just killed Cassie." It went so fast. They weren't traumatized, they were excited. With the tape as evidence, the full picture of what happened on September 22 came into focus, and it was far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. That morning at Pocatello High School, the hallways were full of usual chaos. Security cameras captured Brian Draper approaching Cassie around 8:28 a.m. Just a casual chat between classmates.
That would, but I really wouldn't like that.
Because then it would be all going straight in.
Well, go ahead. Sound behind you.
Hey, look, I don't know.
Hello, Cassie. Yeah. I'm getting you on tape, okay? Say hi, please.
Hi.
Okay, see ya. Wait, have you seen Tori? He's supposed to be here at 7:30, and it's 8:19. He's an hour late. You don't even care, do you? Okay, see ya.
But later that same day, Draper and Adam Chick were in front of their camera finalizing their plans. They knew Cassie was house sitting. They knew it was a big, isolated house. They had the location, they had the victim, and they had the weapons, daggers and hunting knives bought from a pawn shop by a friend. That evening, when they showed up at the Whispering Cliffs house, it was all part of the act. They sat with Cassie and Matt to watch Kill Bill Volume 2, but while they were there, Brian Draper excused himself, said he needed to use bathroom. Instead, he snuck down to the basement and unlocked the door. He was setting the stage. When they left saying they were bored and heading to the movies, Cassie had no idea she wasn't alone. Draper and Adam Chick drove a little ways away, parked and suited up. Dark clothes, gloves, white painted masks. They looked like the villains they idolized. Then they crept back to the house, slipped in through the unlocked basement door and hid. For the next 2 hours they played games. They made noise, hoping to lure Matt and Cassie downstairs. When that didn't work, they found the circuit breaker and flipped the power off. The lights went out. The house went dark. It spooked Cassie. Matt noticed one of the dogs kept staring at the basement stairs, growling. That primal instinct, the dog knew something was off and something was down there. Matt tried to stay. He called his mom to ask permission to spend the night because Cassie was scared. His mom said no, but offered to let Cassie come to their house. Cassie, being responsible, she declined the offer. She was being paid to watch the house and the pets. She felt she had to stay. So around 10:30 p.m., Matt's mom pulled up, honked the horn, and Matt walked out the door. He called Tori's cell phone on his way out, just to see what they were up to. He heard whispering on the other end. He assumed they were in a movie theater. They were actually still in the basement. Once Matt was gone, the killers waited a bit to make sure he wasn't coming back. Then they struck. They flipped the lights off again. They slammed a closet door at the top of the stairs to terrorize Cassie. Then they moved in. The medical examiner documented over 30 stab wounds. 12 of them were potentially fatal on their own. The attack was frenzied and brutal. It was over quickly. Cassie, a 16-year-old kid with a bright future, died on that couch. The killers fled back to Black Rock Canyon. They tried to burn the evidence, the clothes, the mask, the knives, the tape. They burned what was left. Then for a couple of days, they just went back to their lives. They went to school. They acted like normal students. They even continued filming themselves, talking about how they got away with it. But they hadn't counted on their own vanity being their downfall. When they were brought in for questioning, the facade crumbled. Brian tried to spin it. He told detectives it was supposed to be a joke, just a prank to scare her. He claimed he was there, but that Tori was the one who started stabbing. He said Tori told him to make sure she was dead, so he did. He tried to paint himself as a reluctant follower and a good friend, but the tape told a different story. On the tape, they were equal partners in this fantasy. They were both eager. They were both sick with the excitement of it. On September 27, 2006, just 5 days after the murder, Brian and Tori were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. They were tried separately in 2007, but the outcomes were the same. The prosecution played the tapes for the jury. There was no escaping those voices. There was no explaining away those images. The defense tried to shift blame, each one pointing at the other, but the evidence was overwhelming. The court also heard about the depth of their obsession. It wasn't just a Scream movie. In Brian's writing, they found a passage titled Columbine. In it, he called Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold his heroes. He wrote that he would give anything to go back in time and be part of their lives and that he would follow their footsteps. This wasn't a prank that just went wrong. This was a mission, a calculated, a planned one. The jury convicted both of them on first-degree murder, on conspiracy. In August 2007, the judge handed down the sentence required by Idaho law at the time for such conviction. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years for conspiracy charge. They were 17 by then, but they would die in prison. But that wasn't the end of the story. For the next 2 decades, the legal system wrestled with what happened when you lock up a kid and throw away the key. Tori Adam Chick case became a focal point for this debate. His lawyers argued that he deserved a new sentencing hearing. They pointed to a pair of landmark U.S. Supreme Court cases, Miller versus Alabama and Montgomery versus Louisiana, which ruled that mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles are unconditional conditional. The court said kids are different. Their brains aren't fully developed. They have the capacity for change. Adam Chick's team argued that his original trial lawyer messed up. They said he failed to call character witnesses who could have traumatized Tory, showing he was a good kid, from a good home, someone who was manipulated by the more dominant Brian Draper. They claimed that if the jury had seen that side of him, he might have gotten a sentence that included a chance for parole someday. In the video footage, there is a noticeable dynamic. Tory often interrupts Brian, tells him that he's being lame or gay. Brian just agrees. It led many to theorize that Tory was the mastermind, the classic puppet master, and Brian was the depressed, impressionable flower looking for approval. Tory's own mother, Shannon, pushed this narrative hard, even writing a book called The Guilty Innocent to argue that her son wasn't really a killer. The courts weren't convinced. In 2019, a federal judge denied Adam Chick's petition for a writ of habeas corpus. The Idaho Supreme Court had already upheld the convictions. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the sentence in 2022. The legal consensus was that while the mandatory nature of the sentence might be questionable, the fact of the case were so brutal that a life sentence was justified regardless. As of 2026, both men, now in their mid-30s, remain at the Idaho State Correctional Institution. So where does this leave us? In 2024, Draper and Adam Chick were even transported to testify in another murder trial, that of Brian Comfer, accused of killing Norrie Jones in 2004. The defense wanted to float the idea that the Scream killers might have been responsible. They weren't, but it shows how their notoriety lingers. In 2026, Hulu released a docu-series called The Scream Murder, a true teen horror story. It brought the case back into the public eye. It featured new interviews with the killers as adults, and that's the part that's hard to scare. You hear Brian Draper, now 35, saying, "I would give my life if I could change it. If I could go back in time and say, 'It's us, Cassie. We are just joking around.'" You hear him say he felt like nobody and he thought doing something big and bad would make him somebody. His mother, Pam Draper, once said in an interview that she was upset her son got life without parole. It's a devastating position for a parent to be in, to love the son your children became, while being horrified by the thing they did. Lisa Wolfinger, the director of docu-series, said something that sticks with you. She pointed out that these boys didn't see themselves as killers in the moment. They saw themselves as characters in the movie. They thought the FBI would watch their tape and impressed by their mastermind plan. They wanted to be famous. They didn't realize that fantasy, when acted out in real world, has permanent consequences. For Cassie's family, there's no documentary that can change their reality. Her brother, Andrew, said it took them years to even talk about it. They said they were all torn up and still are. It's something they have to live with. Her friends and teachers remembered her simply, not as a straight-A student, not as a future success story, but just as a Cassie, a kind, caring kid with a big soul. The art teacher put it best. She wasn't the best artist. She was just Cassie. That's the truth. That's the truth at the heart of this. She was just Cassie. She was just 16 years old girl doing a favor for her family, and two other 16 years old, fueled by horror movies and desperate need to feel powerful, took her life because they thought it would be cool, because they thought it would make them somebody. In the end, it made them infamous, but it didn't make them who they wanted to be. It just left a trail of broken families, a town haunted by the noise of Whispering Cliffs Drive, and a tape that will forever serve as a chilling reminder of what happens when fantasy and reality collide. That is all for today's case. If you like the video, if you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I will see you in next case. Until then, goodbye and good night.